So, Tom Tully, artificial intelligence all of a sudden has gotten a lot of attention, in part because of ChatGPT, but it's also part of all of our lives at this point. And I believe we're hitting an exponential curve with it. So, what is artificial intelligence? So we can understand it before then we go into its implications and impact on our communities and our organizations.
Yeah, and thanks for having me. I really look forward to it. Yeah, artificial intelligence was actually coined in the 1950s. Gives you an idea that just as computers were starting to emerge, that the computer scientists at that time were thinking, how can we make a computer learn? And what they were looking at is different approaches, but one of the approaches was to take in data, find patterns in that data, and come up with insights. And some of those early applications were like playing checkers. There was an early chatbot called Eliza. So basically, it's taking data, and the definition really hasn't changed too much. It's taking this data, having a computer process it, find the patterns, and come up with some output. And it's gotten obviously smarter and smarter as people use Chat GPT. It's gotten kind of amazingly smart.
Yeah, so ChatGPT is what's known as conversational or generative AI. What does that mean before we go to other aspects of AI?
Yeah, so generative AI means that the the AI will create new content. That's where the generative part comes. Traditional AI usually doesn't create content. It's more about insights or predictions. So, if I run an oil rig, it'll tell me AI will estimate or forecast if a part will not work. It's predictive maintenance. Um, or I can use my AI to determine if a customer might churn. So it's a prediction. AI is generative AI is creating the content. So the Chat GPT is coming up with stuff we never thought of. Or there are these image systems that create images we've never seen or videos we've never seen. So the big difference is it generates content.
Yeah, so as this generates content, Tom, Chat GPT, my understanding is in essence, it has gobbled up the entire internet. That's the information it has. So, how is it generating new content?
Yeah, so as you could probably imagine, it's pretty sophisticated. So there's some algorithms in there that are very sophisticated. And this idea of chat systems have been around again in the mid '60s with Eliza. They've been around for a long time. Um, and then when we started getting these new technologies like deep learning, uh, 10, 15 years ago, these systems got smarter and smarter. So on Google Translate, for example, that was an early example of using some of this deep learning technology for language translation. And then as these systems got better and better, Google started implementing it into its search engine. And so you could, a lot of times just type in a sentence and it could kind of figure out what you're asking. Um, but it's really been since 2017 that we've seen huge breakthroughs in generative AI that has led to ChatGPT. And it wasn't OpenAI; it was actually Google. Researchers at Google came up with a new model called a transformer, and again it's very complicated. But a lot of AI looks at incremental steps, tiny steps. So to recognize in a dog, it may look at a line, and that line looks like an ear, and that ear looks like a head, and then it's over time by going through all these iterations, it figures out. A transformer looks at everything, and it's also very good at looking at sequences of data, and that's important for words and language. And the other insight was that the bigger you make these models, usually the smarter they get. That was not always the case, but using these transformers, that has been the case. But it was with OpenAI who actually took this innovation and ran with it. Google really didn't. And OpenAI came up with GPT-2, GPT-3. Now it's 3.5, which is the basis of ChatGPT. And that's just using these transformer models to create this content. As you say, it's based on huge amounts of content that's publicly available, but it sounds like, it's as if you can talk to a person, and the content that comes back is, seems like it comes from a person.
So I want to go a little bit deeper on this generative AI and chat GPT before going to other aspects of AI. I do want to emphasize that when we understand the scope of chat GPT, this is just one layer of artificial intelligence and how it will impact our lives. So it's we're just going deeper on this very small layer. It's not that generative AI or chat GPT by itself is AI. It's a small part. But going deeper in it, chat GPT at this point, my understanding is I'm not sure what parameters really mean, but it has 170 billion parameters. And the chat GPT 4, which they supposedly OpenAI already has developed. They didn't release it. They don't want people to freak out yet. Has 4 trillion parameters. So it is significantly more powerful. What are parameters? Help us understand how much more powerful this technology will be even in this coming year.
Mhm. Yeah, so a parameter is a variable. Go back to high school, you learn, algebra, and it's really no different. And so what it does is it encodes data and numbers that computers can understand into parameters, and then when it goes through these models, these parameters will be adjusted and weighted. So if a certain parameter or a certain combination of parameters um, re- create results that are more accurate, it'll have a higher weight, and those that aren't will have a lower weight. And it's just this constant going through and iterating through these things. And to create a model like GPT-3, just to train it could take months of all that processing. And the other thing too is just the underlying hardware. I mean, Microsoft essentially had to build a supercomputer to make this work, and they haven't really disclosed many details about that. But that's another competitive advantage. So, where does this go? And once we increase these parameters, it's just it's going to get a lot smarter. And that in some ways, because when you go to ChatGPT, and try answer it and try to trip it up, it doesn't always get the best answers. So that we're going to see probably some significant improvement in that. Although I did see a report today in CNN that someone used ChatGPT for the doctor exam, and it got over a 50% pass rate. So it's doing better than a lot of students that have been going to med school for years.
Yeah, and this is the current version of it. And
Yeah.
the analogy I want to share with everyone, Tom, is I had a conversation with Steve Sasson, who had invented digital camera at Kodak. And when people saw the digital camera at first, they thought, well, this is a toy, no one is going to use it because it's this big thing. The quality of the image is not as good as what would come out on prints. They didn't foresee the fact that pretty soon this thing would have much higher quality or good enough quality and be able to, in essence, decimate what was the picture taking business and Kodak itself. So that's the other thing about ChatGPT and where it's going. It's not just its current capabilities, it's where even the level 4, version 4 is at and where it's headed in the future. Now, one of the things that uh, is important is for us to be able to see potential uses, current and future uses. What do you see as the best uses currently for generative AI, whether ChatGPT or the APIs that are built on top of it? And what will be the future uses for generative AI? Again, before we get to other aspects of AI.
Yeah, I think the killer applications so far, have, at least for business is concerned, is more on the marketing side of things. So if you know, I'm trying to write a blog, you know, writing is not the easiest thing in the world to do, even for writers. You get writer's block, and sometimes you just don't know where to start, or don't, you know, you need to spark some ideas. So the chat GPT may not necessarily write it for you, but it may get you that first draft that you can then, you know, speed up that process. So I think a lot of the marketing and sales, you know, are some of the low hanging fruit. I've seen other areas for like contact support centers. Um, you know, sometimes uh, you get in a lot of emails and not too sure kind of what the current status of, you know, what concerns are out there, but ChatGPT, just ChatGPT alone can summarize it and tell you the 5 things that we need to pay attention to with that. So, but now we're seeing some startups emerge. There's one in the legal area. You know, we're talking, you know, obviously you're dealing with huge amounts of content, contracts, figuring out how those interrelate with each other is very complicated. So that's where this generative AI can be effective. The other is in code generation. You know, even though there's been these layoffs, IT, there's still a huge IT shortage, and companies have a hard time finding IT talent. So Microsoft has Copilot, which is based on OpenAI's Codex, which is an AI system that can help coders code. So you could, you know, you could type something like function average, and it'll look at it and find the variables, and it'll actually write the code for you and write the function. It'll figure it out just based on the context. So that could speed up a lot of activity. And developer productivity has been very difficult for decades. So that could be a revolution there, and that could help out a lot of companies. As to where it goes, I mean, who knows? But you know, I think some of the really exciting things are on video. You know, that's still early stage. I know Facebook has been working on this quite a bit, as well as other companies. But the, you know, one thought experiment could be that you could write a script, and maybe ChatGPT writes the script, and then another, you know, the AI system can turn that into a movie, and it'd be completely automated. So I mean,
Yeah.
those are the kinds of things that we could see. I don't think that's tomorrow. You know, it could be a decade from now, but it seems like we're heading that direction.
So all of this data, all of what ChatGPT is doing is based on what has been on the internet. And Tony asks a great question about, in essence, the potential bias. He says, if AI is trained based on existing content and history, how do we adjust for pre-existing biases that may lead AI to come to conclusions that may not align with some of the initiatives that we are trying to pursue as leaders or as a society?
You know, very good question. When OpenAI was created, that their vision was for responsible AI, um, and you know, some people believe that, you know, they've had issues with that, as probably any organization would. You know, I think, you know, you're dealing with, you know, data is inherently messy. It has bias, it has misinformation, it has inaccuracies. That's just the nature of society. You know, that the internet really is a, you know, reflection of society, and so, you know, there's some parts of it we're not too proud of. And so these companies do have, um, uh, you know, data scientists that are experts in trying to figure this out. You know, but it lags. It's tough. I mean, you know, there's so much to be done there. I mean, if you're looking for job opportunities and careers, that's one of them, because it's probably going to be around forever. And just as society evolves, you know, these models will evolve. But it also raises the other question too: is, you know, whose standards, whose ethics? Is it European way of looking at things? It's the United. We always think everyone, you know, should be, you know, do what we say, or China's. You know, they have a different look on things and what's ethical and what's not. So that raises that question too. So those are not easy things to think about. And but there are systems out there that try to deal with that. And people have put on ChatGPT, like how do you kill somebody, or some nefarious types of questions, and ChatGPT will say, oh, we're not going to answer that, and that's just not a good thing to something that computers should be talking about. So they are already trying to put guardrails in there, but I think it's still early days and there's a lot to be done.
Yeah, so two thoughts about that, Tom. First of all, ChatGPT is trying to put guardrails on it. It's important to keep in mind for all of us that ChatGPT and OpenAI is just one AI initiative. There are many others, and they could choose to put different safeguards or not put safeguards or whatever to that effect. And also the issue of data being messy is an important one. Brian Christian has also written a great book and gives the example of hiring at Amazon, where uh, they they had so much trouble with it. Eventually, they had to stop using it because the data, there was bias in the data, and the artificial intelligence system would find out, for example, if the person had played such and such a sport in high school, they would be more likely to be successful at Amazon. Well, that also correlated highly, let's say, with being white and male. So
Mhm.
they couldn't get rid of the bias that came from the data. And I think to Tony's point is that there is lots of bias that goes into these systems based on the massive amounts of data that they're feeding on.
Yeah, and in the Amazon case, the big problem there was they were using their data was the resumes that were sent to Amazon, and most of those were male. So the data set was skewed very much towards male and probably younger as well. So it wasn't a great data set to work off. And they tried, and it never worked. At least they tried. At least they recognized they recognized the problem, and they owned up to it, which I think is encouraging. There's another famous case with the Apple Card, or and they teamed up with Goldman Sachs, and when it was released, there was a all of a sudden Twitter lit up, and um, the credit limits for females were generally lower than they were for males. And what was interesting is um, they never used gender as a parameter in their model, but the data set. Um, but data, you don't necessarily have to do that to skew the data. It could be gender could be revealed in so many different ways in your data, and so Apple did was able to fix that, but it just shows how complicated these problems are, and even the best data scientists in the world, the best tech companies in the world, and financial services companies, will make mistakes.
Yeah, and so we have to be aware of all these potential biases. What I would say though is uh whether it's a fact of life, fortunately, unfortunately, uh, these systems, forget about chat gpt, these AI systems are being used all around us. So right now, from whether you want to get a mortgage or want to get a job, there are lots of AI systems pulling on lots of data sources that, in many instances, even the organizations themselves can't attribute specifically whether the initial training data was biased or not. So it's a challenge that we need to be aware of, but it's not just a function of what ChatGPT is using. I
Right.
think ChatGPT has highlighted the power of AI, but it's being used consistently. Before we started, we were talking about the fact that a lot of companies use ATSs, applicant tracking systems, which uses AI to pick out specific attributes of a successful candidate. Now, there are tools people can use that they can feed a job application to, that the AI formats their resume to fit the other AI. So AI is all around us with all of the biases. We have to be aware of it, but it's all around us. Now, Stephen is asking, are there any existing, and by the way, thank you for the question, Stephen. And if any of you have questions like that for Tom, let him know. He might know of resources, which is outstanding, and he might not, or we might get back to you on it. Are there any existing AI tools or apps that you're aware of that could equalize the playing field around accessing resources? For instance, how to access available federal resources after disasters is exponentially more difficult for rural, small, and poor communities. Any insights or any trends to follow?
Um, in terms of access to information, um, I don't think it's necessarily that AI would democratize that per se, but the internet certainly does. So um, having access to broadband in those communities is extremely important, and I think that's something that is a focus and a priority. Um, and also making these systems redundant. So if there are these natural disasters, information can get through. You probably don't necessarily want the AI because in those situations, you're just looking for, where do I go? Where are the resources for me that are available? Things like that. That's more of just getting access. It's probably more about access than having a sophisticated AI system handle that. But AI could be helpful in terms of warning systems. So, is whether our ability to track hurricanes or some of these other things, get better with these analytical tools and systems that have emerged, and also our ability to process huge amounts of data. So that that could save lives too in terms of notifying people. But again, I want to make sure you got to make sure that also people just have the access. Period. If not, this information is obviously not going to be very useful to you.
So, Tom, we talked quite a bit about generative AI, Chat GPT being one kind of generative AI. By the way, I was just reading just today, Microsoft announced that they are putting Chat GPT as a part of Microsoft Teams,
Mhm.
where in team meetings, it's going to capture meeting notes, summarize meeting notes, highlight when you can connect and follow up with meetings. So it becomes a powerful tool for Microsoft in promoting teams. Outside of generative AI, where do you see uses of AI being most transformative in the way businesses operate and in our lives over the coming years? I understand, 10, 15 years from now, there's conversations about potential sentience or not. Not that, but over the next couple of years, what are current applications of AI where uh, I forget who said it. I don't think it was Kevin Kelly that the future is now. It's just not equally distributed. So
Mhm.
you are our representative to the future, 2, 3 years from
Mhm.
now, because you're seeing some of these tools. What do you see as the most transformative uses of AI in organizations that will impact us over the next couple of years?
I think one thing that's been a problem in organizations is that there's all these new technologies that come about, and a company will think, oh, we'll spend a lot of money and we'll transform ourselves because we spend a lot of money on software, and then they find out the ROI wasn't very significant, or people didn't use the software, or it was too complicated, or really didn't fit within their workflows. I do think that what will be transformative in the next couple of years is the natural language interface. I think that's going to become the standard for how to use um, business software. Um, you know, the typical user interface we have today is, work. when we didn't have the sophisticated AI. We have drag and drop, we have menus that come down, we have these buttons and we press, and that's all great. But you know, a lot of times there's training and onboarding and those kinds of things that you need to do. But if someone can just ask a question, or learn about something, even just something as prosaic as the um, company HR handbook, which probably no one looks at. Um, if you could just ask a question that you would to your HR person and get a good response, and you know you don't have to go through this complicated process to get that answer and do all this searching. um, you're already ahead of the game because those things waste so much time in an organization. So I think, you know, and I think the other thing too is that, what happens a lot too is that, let's say I'm a business analyst and I want to look at the churn rate for the company. And these are mostly for bigger companies, for example. And then I have to talk to the data engineer who has a million other things on their plate, and maybe 2 weeks they will get to it, and I'll get my access to the data, and then it takes me another week to come up with something, and we got it. But if I could just go into the data system and type in and get the data, I, i've I've just created a lot of efficiency. So I think the big thing will be breaking down the friction and promoting efficiency and allowing more people within your organization to utilize the technologies you already have. I mean, we're not even talking about new technologies. I think part of the thing that loss of opportunity is just that we're not taking advantage of all these great resources that exist today.
And what about the specific types of positions or jobs that will be most impacted? So, for example, whether it's with ChatGPT or some of the tools that have been built off of it, as I've been looking into them, I can see that writing of content of almost any kind other than the most insightful content, writing of blog posts, writing of marketing brochures, writing of websites, there's not going to be a job in doing that, right? Because right
Right.
now you can write a great brochure, couple of the tools that build off of ChatGPT without needing someone to do it. What are the types of jobs that you believe artificial intelligence will impact the most over the next few years?
Definitely content creation. Um, if you're not doing something that's value add, those types of jobs are going to go away. Even stuff like on search, for like search engine optimization, all that kind of stuff. It's pretty labor intensive, but computers are going to be able to do that a lot quicker, and companies are just going to buy off the shelf services to get that done. Um, excuse me. I mentioned the coding, for example. If you're a junior coder and you're not going up and improving, those jobs are going to go away. The other, these image, uh, like Mid Journey and so forth, these generative image creators. If you're a commercial artist, unless you're doing something that's really fantastic, you may want to look for another career. And the fact is that companies, if they find a solution that gets the job done and is a lot cheaper, and they don't have to hire somebody to do it, they're going to use the computer. They're going to use the automation. Um, I do think that that it's over the years. I think there probably be categories like accounting or even law, where you have clerks and paralegals and so forth that do a lot of work that maybe AI can do. So it's pervasive. The question is, are there enough new jobs created, or are those available to take up for that? And also, reskilling is always been proved to be challenging. People have a hard time moving into different areas, so it could cause some societal problems in the years ahead with people who are you know automated out of their livelihood and don't know where to go.
Yeah, and that is one of the challenges I also see, Tom. It's easy for some to say we just need to retrain people, but it's not necessarily that easy to take a 40, 50, however 60-year-old and turn them all of a sudden into a coder, even though at this
Yeah.
point coding,
That's
Microsoft
right.
Satya Nadella said that
Yeah.
their coders, more than 30% of their work is done by Copilot, right? So even
Right.
coding
Yeah.
is being automated at this point. So that reskilling is important. However, it's easier said than done. Couple of thoughts and comments and questions. Monica, great to see you. Monica says we are already using AI in various aspects of accounting, tax, and consulting work, and still need more professionals. So
Yeah.
go
Well,
ahead.
that goes to the training. Same way with IT. Um, IT has a huge shortage right now because there's just not enough people that have the skills. So if there, there are high level skills in every profession. Um, we just need to train them. And why can't we train people for these skills? I mean, it seems like that would be a good use of resources. Um, and I think, for whatever reason, it's just something that's not done very well. Um, but that I think that we're going to have to, because some of these jobs are going to go away, and we want everyone to benefit and enjoy you know the to make a great living and do things that they want.
Well, couple, this is not huge jobs, a couple of jobs that have been created in a couple of the teams and
Mhm.
organizations that I work with, for lack of better way of putting it, are chat GPT prompt masters.
Sure.
Because one of the things, anyone that has spent time on chat GPT, is that with regular generalized prompts, you get very generalized, not very good responses. However, knowing how to prompt it, you can get some powerful content created. So, a couple of the teams that I work with, they have assigned a person, in essence, to go deeper on learning how to prompt Chat
Yeah.
GPT well, so they can get the work done. So in some instances, even interacting with the AI requires deeper understanding. Now, Jackie says, what jobs in healthcare do you believe will or may become obsolete?
I mean, I think, there's a huge amount of administrative pieces to the healthcare system, that could probably be automated. I'm not an expert in healthcare, so um, I'm assuming that there's efficiencies there. Um, I do think, um, you know, but this is tricky too because it's highly regulated. But it does seem like, we've already seen these telehealth systems, but they're human operated. I do think at some point, as these systems get smarter, they can start answering questions that, um, a doctor, not the serious questions, but answer questions that, maybe it's maybe like customer support where there's like different levels. Maybe there's a certain basic level where a lot of these questions can, certain questions can be answered, and then it's elevated to a doctor when something serious happens. So I do think there's probably, a lot of, patient facing type of things, especially when people can just type a sentence, or or even just collecting information, interviewing the patient through an AI that can then be summarized and then it goes to a doctor. So I think there's a lot of interesting things that can be done. I do mention also that a friend of mine, he's a entrepreneur and been in the tech business for a long time. We talked about automation and like who's the first jobs to go, and so we went to healthcare and we looked at a doctor versus a nurse, and we thought that the doctor would be automated before the nurse because the nurse is more of about helping, you know caregiving, whereas a doctor a lot of times is assessing, the patient, diagnosing the patient, and then prescribing certain things. Now, you're probably not going to have a heart surgeon as your AI, at least not now, but there's certain functions that a doctor performs that probably could be automated. But I think that's given where the healthcare system is right now, the expense of the healthcare system, and difficulty of providing adequate care to a lot of people, it seems like it would be an overall huge benefit to everybody in society by adding some of this automation. And I don't think doctors ultimately. I think doctors will probably be around for a long time still.
Yeah, so one of the challenges is marrying AI with robotics, which has also advanced a lot.
Mhm.
Uh, Tom, there are now robots that can, run, jump, lift things up, all of those things. When do you see the robotics catching up? So there is the potential for whether elder care
Mhm.
support or other things being done with marrying of the artificial intelligence along
Right.
with somewhat capable robots.
Yeah. Well, look at Japan. There's quite a bit of robot technology. I mean, they've been at the forefront of robots for quite some time. But they have a population that's aging quickly, and they're very not the birth rate is just keeps on declining. So that they've been forced into finding ways to providing caregiving through the use of robots. And some of these are um, actually kind of human. They almost feel people get attached to them, and there is benefit there. There were some videos, yeah, of Boston Robotics. There were some videos a few years ago where some people were kicking and hitting these robots, and people responded to it like they were thinking, "Stop that! Don't do that," because they look the way they move and the way they act seems human, and it just doesn't seem right that you should be kicking the robot.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and that goes to the point of at what point it was a Google engineer. Some people dismissed him that
Yeah,
felt that the AI he was interacting with was sentient, and
right.
that's the question in some people's minds at this point. But I wonder for the leaders in LGW in working in their teams and organizations outside of playing around with chat gpt, and I know some of the organizations have implemented different aspects of ai, where would be places to experiment with ai? Where would be places that would lend themselves? What would be the types of things that would lend themselves to seeking tools on ai? So
Mhm.
for example, Tom, almost on a daily basis I'm finding a dozen incredible AI tools that are blowing my mind for specific functions and specific things. So there's lots of things out there. So for the LGW leaders in working with their teams or organizations, in addition to what they read in the general newspapers, which is generally about chat gpt, very general, where should they look at use of ai? What are some places, areas that they should experiment in?
Yeah, so on this AI, if you're in the early stages of the AI journey, it's all about small wins, and it's all about kind of the low hanging fruit, and also try not to risk too much. So you probably don't want to start with customer facing activities. You don't want to experiment on that. That comes later. So maybe certain things in the back office that you can automate. I mean, and some of this may just seem just you know prosaic or ordinary, but you know, a system for resetting passwords is one of the most effective pieces of automation you can do in an organization. I mean, because your support people are not wasting time on something that is just such a you know routine thing, but it needs to get done. So I think there are a lot of those types of things And the good news is these automation systems are getting better and better, so they can um, write, a lot of this document recognition, where it can look at an invoice and pick out all the right information, and then you know process that and goes to approval. Maybe you need, maybe it's a low amount, maybe the approval isn't, you don't need a human approval. Maybe it's a higher amount, you do need a human approval. There are a lot of those systems that I think can go a long way in helping, and also just, just don't boil the ocean. I mean, whenever you're trying to do 50 things at once, yeah, you usually fail. So pick up one or two things to start and come up with some KPIs or goals you want to hit, and then do it. And then you go on to the next thing. And then you build those AI muscles over time.
Yeah, and a couple of points you had also made in your book that I found very insightful and relevant as I'm interacting with clients is look at where your data is, and wherever you have data, you have real potential for a use of AI that will be able to detect patterns and find things that you might not have been able to see before. So,
Yeah.
for example, Kate runs a chamber membership organization. I'm sure you have a good sense, but the AI picks out patterns that you might not have picked out before. So, what I've seen and what I've been guiding people on based on your recommendation, Tom,
Mhm.
is where do you have the data? Look for AI platforms that are out there that are meant for tapping into that data. They can
Right.
bring up real insights that you would not have gotten otherwise.
Yeah. I mean, every organization has email. It's hard to find the patterns because it's unstructured data. No emails alike, unless they're spam. But most of the real emails that you get, are all over the map, and people write long ones, people write short ones, people have spelling errors and things like that. So it's hard, at a certain point, you can't look at all that email on your own and manually do it. You need some automation, you need some AI. But yeah, just processing your emails alone can tell you a lot about your organization. That's data that's there, but a lot of times people don't. That's the other thing too. It's just something called dark data. It's data that companies have that they don't realize that they have, or they have and they just don't pay attention to it. There's a lot of that data available that could be valuable for insights.
Uh, Tom, I would love to get some of your thoughts on a public policy front as well, at least based on what uh, I'm seeing. Um, Yuval Harari described this best, where the AI is becoming really close to figuring out our emotions better than we can. And for people that don't believe it, Facebook actually has a very powerful AI system, in many respects, much more powerful than ChatGPT's generative AI, where uh, it can figure out exactly which buttons of each individual can be pushed to elicit a response. So the AI, in many respects, is starting to get to know us and our emotions better than we know us and our emotions. And without checks and balances, the AI or whoever is controlling that AI can control masses of people. How can we as a society think about those things and addressing it? Because this is not in a way distant future. This is pretty much where Facebook's AI is at right now.
Yeah, and the same with TikTok. Obviously very controversial because of the owned by the Chinese. But yeah, there are studies, more and more studies coming out about the impact of social media, especially on teenagers, younger people. and usually it's not very positive. So, um, I mean, we've all seen, unfortunate, about, you know, people's, it could cause people to engage in not eating, terrible diets, believing certain things that are not true. Um, and, these companies operate on the principle of, uh, like a coffee addiction. They just got to keep you addicted and keep you going, and that's how they get the clicks. So there's not a lot of incentive for them to change, and it probably would have to be external. I think you're seeing more of this in Europe, um, um, in terms of what they're doing with their regulation, and they're being more aggressive on that, and also going against U.S. companies that violate those rules. Not so much here in the United States, but I could see that there's probably some negative long-term consequences to this, and I know that there are advocates out there that are trying to move the needle and make make for change, but it's difficult, and I think that we need more of that because we're probably playing with dynamite here, and not sure where this will lead. Um, and also that just they just especially for younger people, spending so much time on the when I was a kid, even though I was on computers a lot, I still went outside to play and played sports and do all that kind of stuff. So I do think there's some just regardless even what the content is like on that, just being in front of a smartphone all day or your computer all day is can't be healthy either.
So one other thought that then connects back to ChatGPT before we wrap up, and I share a thought of my own with the group as well, is that by all accounts, Google has had DeepMind for a long time and has real capabilities, um, and will introduce something similar to ChatGPT. What do you think the potential future of Google and search will be with whether ChatGPT or similar type functionality that Google introduces?
Yeah, I think I missed a couple there, but I think I got the gist of your question. Um, the like I said, it was Google that came up with a lot of the breakthroughs of generative AI and what became ChatGPT. Just like Kodak created a lot of the systems that Apple took and made billions and billions of dollars and turned Kodak into a bankrupt company. Um, this is a game. This is a tough game, and Google has been top of the king of the hill for search for over. I mean, they invented it, and they've maintained that leadership every day. Um, it's only a matter of time before there's something else um, that I think Google can. Again, they're going to come up with ChatGPT. It could be better, but what about the business model? um, they rely on clicks, not subscriptions. So they may have to completely rethink their whole business model, and that may be a lot less revenue for a company like Google, and they would have to make some big adjustments for that. Now they do have some big advantage. They have huge advantages because I go to Google still. I mean, there's certain things that Google does that ChatGPT doesn't. Sometimes one is that ChatGPT was only up to 2021. So if I want more recent information, I have to go to Google. Or if I need links, if I want to find a website, or I'm doing some really in-depth research and I want to look at different articles, Google is where to go. But I would say probably in my personal viewing search habits, I'm using Google less, and I'm sure. And already, New York Times had this article where Google is already at code red and hair on fire, and they're going to start launching a lot of new products this year. So it's going to be exciting, no question about that. I think Google will remain. I don't think they're going to be another Kodak anytime soon, but I think they could struggle for some time.
Yeah, it will be interesting to watch that. Now, Lance asks, any thoughts on government's oversight and regulation of AI?
Yeah, I think it's well, China has significant. If you could probably, you know, they have a lot of control over AI, and over the data and what can be done with it. So there's that one extreme. In the United States, we're the cowboys, we're the freewheeling group here, entrepreneurs, and you know, and we don't like generally don't like government in the United States, and so it's harder to I think to regulate it. Whereas in Europe is probably between the United States and China. But what you are seeing, different states implement privacy laws, California, New York, Virginia, and I think those are going to evolve into AI laws in the next few years. So it may not be federal regulation, it may be a patchwork of state regulation. And we may also see it also go more towards the courts as well. We've already seen that with generative AI, where these artists uh, feel like their artwork is being ripped off because these systems are taking their artwork and creating new artwork from it. So is that a violation of their copyright? So I think we're going to see copyright and intellectual property disputes explode in the next few years. As the old saying goes, the attorneys will make a lot of money off of this. So,
And as long as then some of the contracts will be written by ChatGPT and
exactly,
similar tools, because that's already happening.
exactly.
Well, Tom, really appreciate this conversation.
Yeah.
For those attending, feel free to send me if you're are looking for AI tools or applications, and I've seen some. I'll share it with Tom, and happy to try to get you started in ways that will help you out. Part of what I've loved about your content, Tom, by the way, Rebecca put a link in the chat. Please make sure to fill out the survey. Part of what I've seen, and I had shared with LGW folks before, is that AI is hitting its exponential curve. And as humans, we have a very hard time understanding exponential change. And this is going to impact all aspects of how we live and work. So this conversation was just the start of it. ChatGPT is just one small, very small use case of AI. So please feel free to let us know. We will have more conversations. Tom's book is a great primer for it. Artificial intelligence basics on tomtaulli.com. Tom writes a blog and writes an update on different AI applications, tools, impact. So really appreciate you joining. Glenn Howard, my friend, Glenn also put a link in there. XAPPAI, controversial AI experiences people want to use. So thank you for that. We will share more information. Feel free to reach out. Thank you so much, Tom Taulli, for
Yeah.
joining Leadership Greater Washington.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Thank you, everyone.